Episode of the Edifice Complex podcast is brought to you by Tether. Get smart, get tethered. Blue Rhythm commissioning software, and SensorSuite, the future of intelligent buildings.
Welcome to the Edifice Complex, the property design and development podcast. Let your hosts Adam Muggleton and Robert Bean keep you up with who is innovating and doing great work, perspective on the adjacent possible, and challenges to the status quo.
Welcome to the Edifice Complex. I'm Robert Bean, your co-host and unofficial mediator, here again with my colleague, official agitator, friend, and Yoda of most everything to do with buildings, Mr. Adam Muggleton. Say hello, Sir Yoda.
Hello there. So interesting. One of my favorite topics, one of the topics I blog about the most is IoT and technology in buildings, because the epic resistance of the property industry to change, I think these are the things that are going to change it, right? So it should be an interesting conversation today.
So today's guest started his career in New Zealand, honing his business development skills before moving up to Canada. Good move. To work in the power sector, including time with PowerLink, Spark Power, and Bullfrog Power. Now with over 22 years experience, Glen Spry is applying his skills as the CEO and president of SensorSuite, a leading Internet of Things company focusing on the optimization and efficiency of HVAC systems in small and mid-market buildings for real estate investment trusts and other portfolio managers. Welcome to the show, Glen.
Well, welcome. No, that sounds like more of a mouthful than I'm used to delivering. So, yeah, thank you for the intro.
Hey, listen, we're always like to hear our guest stories, so tell us yours.
Wow, gee whiz. So let's go back a few years. My mother was incredibly disappointed when I turned down law at Auckland University to play professional golf. I ended up playing so well that I needed to get a real job. And since then, I've found myself, let's say, drawn into the world of sales. Managed to embody, I would consider this to be, we'll say, professional ADD. I have worked everything from advertising and media, finance through to environmental fuel technologies, and end up landing in the energy sector in New Zealand. And we'll say that sometimes you got to kiss a few frogs before you find your prince, and I think I've landed on that now.
Nice. So tell us about how you ended up working your way into the SensorSuite gig. What's that all about?
Look, mate, it's really the combination of the energy experience that I've had over the last decade now. So I think cutting my teeth in the energy utility space in New Zealand for Genesis Energy, a gentailer down there. So a utility that runs generation assets and a retail front to that as well. Now we were in the pursuit of trying to figure out what was going to happen to the energy industry. And everything for me started to point towards the fact that we were going to see a convergence of technologies really culminating at the grid edge, so at or behind the meter. And for me, that set me off on a bit of a journey to gain experience in all those little areas, those little black boxes of the energy space. So I ticked off the box with the utility world, moved up here to Canada, and jumped into a nice little startup out of the Mars Clean Tech Ventures and PowerLink, which was a combined heat and power company, a cogen company. And that really opened my eyes to what that distributed energy resource world was doing. Following that, a nice little bit of experience over there at Spark Power, which really brought the services component in. So everything from high, medium, and low voltage sort of sectors, and it was just these little pieces of the energy industry that I knew the basics of, but didn't really have that depth of knowledge that was really going to set me on a good course. And then following my departure from Spark, I was lucky enough to have a round of golf with someone who said, "Hey, have you heard of these guys from SensorSuite?" And I'm like, well, the name rings a bell, but I couldn't figure out why. And they said, "Yeah, well, they're looking for an interim CEO. I think you should go and have a chat to them." Now, I went into what I thought was going to be a chat. It turned out to be the first 5-panel interview. So, we'll just say, yeah, surprise. That's it, embodying that lucky than good philosophy. But really, the IoT game for me was, it was that last sort of frontier of the energy transition that I really needed to gain some experience in. But it was also, for me, the the bit that really drove home. It was the glue that brought everything together. So incredibly excited to take the helm at SensorSuite, and really, really excited to stake our claim in what's going to be the energy transition from here on.
Well, that's interesting because, yeah, I've worked sort of in different places in the world, and one thing that's pretty consistent, certainly in Western countries, is that the energy grid is really a 1950s, 1960s phenomenon, right? As it sits at the moment, and it needs upgrading. Yeah,
if you're lucky. I think, like it's based on a 140-year-old design schematic, right? It is. I think when our sort of grid was really first put into play, the primary mode of transport was horse and buggy. Right. To put some perspective around it, people could be forgiven for thinking that we're actually, we're in the Tesla age of the grid. The fact that it's not, I think we're actually probably more akin to, it's probably the Model T Ford. We've only just got to the point where we've productionized it. But the fact is that when we look at what's coming down the pipe at that aged infrastructure, at that aged design schematic, you've got an armada of technology just all pointed at taking their share of it now.
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, again, the problem with the grid is it's old. It's been a long time.
Yep.
It has companies around it that are very entrenched in terms of what they do in terms of labor, management of labor, servicing of the grid, keeping the grid going, right? To interrupt that or change that is a very difficult thing.
Yes, it is. And I think we've got to look now at sort of those forces that are evolving this market and the energy transition. Yep. If we look at the status quo, you've got, like, I might be a little blunt here, but there's an acronym called D.O.U.G. The D.O.U.Gs of this world, the dumb old utility guys. Now, there'll be some people out there who will listen to this and go, "Oh, I don't know any D.O.U.Gs." Well, those are the D.O.U.Gs. The fact is, it really is. Like, it's the guys out there that I'll be a little bit mean to. They've got their ticket to the retirement train. They're used to the ways of old, and they're just waiting to clip the ticket and get off. The fact is that the technology suite that's coming in today, that's not just sort of at various levels of sort of commercialization or they're down the path of being sort of market ready. They're here. They're just there in the optimization stage. And there are really two mindsets I see in the old guard. Number one is a protectionism play. It's I'm going to preserve what I have at all costs, and they will obstruct any attempt to integrate with that system that will ultimately erode value. And then you've
just described the whole construction industry in one sentence.
Yeah. Preserve and obstruct.
Yeah, well, I tell you what, it's alive and kicking in the energy industry as well. I guess the other side of it is when you look at the somewhat more progressive companies, and there are a few out there that are trying to, figure out what their place is in this new world of energy. But they're shackled because the amount of money you need to spend on R&D to get up to the level that businesses like mine are at is just cost prohibitive. And but notwithstanding the fact that when you do that, you want a return out of it. And well, I'm already 3 steps ahead. So I'm the one who, hey, it might be an exit strategy one day, but the fact is that I'm just one of thousands of companies in this space that all have their own unique IP that is designed to do one thing, and that's extract value out of the demand side of the energy equation.
So can you give us an example of that?
Yeah, well, look, the best example running around the world right now is California. I mean, you look at the notifications that came out of PG&E at the last fire season, where, quite frankly, now you've got nearly 2.5 million customers in that network who were told, hey, so we really don't want to start any more fires. So what we're going to do is we're going to turn off your power when there's a high fire risk. And everyone sort of swallowed their, well, what do you mean? And then they find out that they said, expect to have power outages last somewhere between 8 hours and 7 days. Now, what we're seeing here is, you're seeing the combination of we'll call it a litany of poor decision making from the past that ended up where we've got the campfire that happened, and it was a horrible thing to happen down there. But off the back of that, now you have millions of Californians who can no longer trust or rely on continuity of supply of energy. So what do? You sit in that position and you start looking at, well, okay, if they're not going to do it, what can I do that's going to improve my resilience and reliability myself? How can I be more self-reliant? And jump onto the Google machine, have a quick look, and what do you see? You see Sunrun, you see SunPower, you see Generac, all slamming that area with home storage, rooftop solar, EVs, EV paired with rooftop solar, EV paired with storage, et cetera, et cetera. But what they're really, really banking on is the fact that you're going to have a consumer shift. And as much as California is a great example today, you have to look around the world and you can see the lessons that should have been learned from many other jurisdictions. Australia is a great example with 40% penetration of rooftop solar in the residential space. 40% of all households in Australia have rooftop solar. Now, I remember being back in 2013, 14 at an energy conference in Australia where a utility executive of an Australian utility stood up and said, last year I had $2,600 a year customers. Those customers that put solar on, I make $600 a year out of those now. Now, that's a massive drop in revenues. And when you start talking about 40% penetration, that becomes quite an interesting equation for a lot of those executives. But now compound that with what's happening today is all of those systems are now being paired with storage. So that $600 a year customer is now somewhere around the 100 to 150 in fixed charges per annum. Now, that's a paradigm shift at a utility level, but it was driven by consumer demand. I think it bring it all back is, I think what we're seeing is the consumer is no longer viewing the energy portion of their utility bill as something that they just have to pay now. By and large, look, I can see that is by and large the way it is still today. But in those jurisdictions where either a government program or the environment has pushed them into a corner, they start looking for options. And right now there's no shortage of options today. And gee whiz, over the next couple of years, that's just going to grow exponentially.
So I see that trend, and mostly because I travel a lot. But here in Canada, when I landed here, I immigrated here in 2007. I might as well set my clock back to 1973. I mean, I see things here I haven't seen in decades in Europe. And taking your example there of the utility companies, the revenues dropping by magnitudes of, right? So if you've got a legacy of union employees and defined benefit pensions, how do you cope with that? I think even if you got to a situation where you could have 100% solar power and no juice, they're going to charge you what you used to get charged anyway for access to the grid or something, because they've got to pay these pensions.
Absolutely, and it's not just the pensions. We now get into the conversation topic around stranded assets. Who wants to be the person who sits there and goes, "Oh, those transmission lines are no longer worth what they once were"? Who's going to swallow that? But to your point, the market itself here is unique, and as much as it's quite a reliable system, continuity of supply is quite high. It is, look, I would go so far as to say I don't think you could design a more dysfunctional system if you set out to design a dysfunctional system. And
Canada wins.
And look, I've been lucky enough to be at conferences over the US and different provinces in Canada, and the common theme through it is make sure you don't do what they did. Because and it's sad in one way, but equally when you look at it's just tough to be connected because you're not really the master of your destiny here. The fact is, if we boil it down to what's happening in this post COVID-19 world, now I'm maybe a bit presumptive to call it post at the moment. However, you just look at the way that people are consuming energy differently here in Ontario. We are every day now is a Saturday in terms of the demand profile. Now, that's a good thing because now you're actually at a position where you've got a fair amount of capacity there in reserve. The problem is the way that the global adjustment system is set up here. Even in previous seasons where it was chasing the peaks was highly sought after, you could have the difference between the first and second peaks only 20 to 30 megawatts. That was predominantly driven by residential HVAC when people drove home and turned everything on to cool the house down. If the majority of people are already at home, you don't have those peaks. So now the difference between the top peak and the second, third, and fourth could be as little as 3, 4, or 5 megawatts. Now you can't chase those. That's just not feasible to do it. So there are some unique challenges in being connected to this market. I mean, look, the bonus is by and large it's a very reliable market.
Yeah.
But you can't unfortunately you can't bank on the cost of connection, because it is such a fluid beast. And right now the costs are baked in. Even though we're consuming less money, there's the old sort of Vegas adage, the house always wins, right? There's a bill that needs to be paid. So that cost is just now spread over a smaller volume. And we're seeing already now somewhere in the vicinity of a 20 to 25 increase in the in the cost of being connected to the system today.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I've got some friends in California who've tried to put on rooftop solar, and it got to the point where so many obstacles were being thrown in front of them. Connection fees, we're not coming for another 6 months, just hang on, It was just, I mean, when you're in the industry, you know what that is.
Yeah.
You think, scale that up. How does that end?
Not well, to be honest, because what you're basically seeing there is the fact that you've got so much technology that is maturing, and it has matured to a point where it just makes sense to purchase it. And what you're seeing is how far behind the 8 ball so many of our D.O.U.Gs are. And you can only play that that obstructive play so long before you can no longer catch up. And the fact is that the rooftop solar industry by and large, the storage industry, the IoT industry, the powered ahead. You've seen battery storage drop by 80% over the last 5 years.
Which is the killer application, right? Storage is everything here.
That's it. That's exactly it. Because you need to bring all of these assets together. Now it's kind of like the analogy I use is that the industry right now is filled with soloists. So you've got a lot of people who have just created some IP and they've nailed it. They have. But we need an orchestra. We need all these little pieces to come together to really provide that killer value proposition. One of the things, and also one of the things that influenced my decision to join SensorSuite was I saw SensorSuite not only being able to play their role in the orchestra, but the platform that we've built really comes together as the conductor. And I think that's where the true opportunity lies. And going back to the utility brethren, a number of them are going to be caught short when all this technology comes together, because quite frankly, the whole resilience and reliability sort of play that they had in their playbook is being watered down substantially. The idea here is if I have, we'll call it just 5 kilowatts on my roof, I've got a 10, 15 kilowatt battery on my garage wall, and fingers crossed, I have one of the new Rivian 4x4s in my garage with a 180 kilowatt hour battery. At what point am I worried about resilience where 2 or 3 weeks I have continuous power supplied to my house from my truck, let alone what's on the wall in my garage, let alone how it's being replenished through those solar panels? At what point do I just go, I don't need to be grid connected? And that's, so looking back at those earlier points around stranded assets, it's going to happen a lot faster, and it's going to be driven by consumers rather than we'll call it the somewhat monopolistic utilities that have usually run the show.
The Edifice complex will continue in just a moment.
Robert, are we there yet? I'm bored.
I know it's hard to believe, but the future has finally arrived in Canada.
How's that then?
Well, smart remote building and equipment management is now available from SensorSuite.
Go on.
SensorSuite, yep. They're an innovator in smart building technology. We like them. They can monitor, control, and optimize anything in your building, saving you time and energy.
You mean SensorSuite are moving Canadian buildings into the 21st century?
Yeah, I know, another hard thing to believe, but they're doing it, and they're saving owners money with efficiency gains.
Okay, I'm in. How do I find out more?
Got to go to SensorSuite.com or call 1-855-773-6767. And also check out the July 2020 episode of the Edifice Complex podcast and listen to SensorSuite CEO Glen Spry.
And now, back to the show.
My theory is if, say, it got to the point where there was on aggregate, a large number of people who wanted to be disconnected because they had all these things going, I actually believe the government will pass a law and make it illegal for safety reasons. You have to be on the grid in case of emergencies. Therefore, you owe us $250 a month, and thank you.
Wow. I'm gonna go with it's probably going to be done a lot smarter and a lot sort of
passive aggressively, because we're in Canada.
Yeah,
right? Be passive
They'll
aggressive.
put it in your taxes, your property taxes. They'll find a way.
That's it. So it's going to find its way into either the tax base or the rate base, but that will be the option of last resort. The first option will be when it comes to connection charges on your current bill, and insert name here of what sort of what line item they're going to throw on it. But the fact is that we're already seeing it now under the guise of sort of capacity charges. So you may decide to go off grid, air quotes, because I don't think anyone's going to truly cut the cable just yet.
Yeah.
But then they will bill you a prorated amount for the single largest consumption hour in a calendar year. So if you decide to have a birthday party, invite everyone over and throw all the lights on, it's really cold, throw all the heaters on, and that might be, sort of, late Jan. If that's the 1 hour that you have your largest consumption period, that will set the benchmark for your demand charges for the balance of the year. That's a veiled way of ensuring that you cover your infrastructure costs. And if we look here at the LDC fraternity here, look, again, by and large, the system is well put together, but it's certainly not a money-making machine. So they don't have cash reserves to compete against a lot of this sort of stuff. And at the end of the day, they're remunerated for the amount of assets they have in field. If you start watering down the value of those assets, those businesses are going to run into trouble. It's just a fact that, unfortunately, I think going back to the consumer again, the consumer out there is just getting their head around the options that they have. When it becomes mainstream, and when you start getting, when the marketing machine that supports the decarbonisation of our grids really kicks into gear, all of a sudden the options that you didn't know you had are going to be pushed right in front of your face. Yeah. So it's just going to accentuate it. So there are some interim measures I think that the system operators can deploy that will protect the near term, but the end game for me is that story has been written.
Glen, is there a demographic story that's tied into all of this?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, look, you have to concede that it's enough a middle class game at the moment if you want to be talking around EV, grid defection, PV panels, that sort of stuff. And it is, the fact is, if you've got some cash in the bank and you want to be the coolest kid on the block, you throw some panels up on your roof and you buy yourself a Tesla, right? And everyone's going, wow, look at that car makes no noise as it drives down the road. There is no real business case for that right now, because the fact is that there's a fashion value to it that I think most people are really going on. Not taken away from the fact that there are some eco-conscious people out there who believe it's the right thing to do, and I'll put my hand up and say that I've done it, and I do think it's the right thing to do. But the fact is that when you start to sort of peel away, you realize that there's real energy poverty out there already with people who can't actually pay their bills and are really struggling to just keep the lights on and keep the heat on today. Going back to the whole thing, the system operator or the house always wins. If you just pull more and more people off that grid, it's just the poor people at the end of it, and that's literally and figuratively poor people at the end of it are left with the bill. And unfortunately, I think that will then accentuate a lot of that rate basing or tax basing of those stranded asset value costs.
So where does government come into this? Because obviously at some point they're going to realize that there's just no way that population base can support these stranded assets. It's just not going to happen.
Well, we're hearing some interesting whispers now. I think we have to be conscious that there's a pre and post COVID scenario here. The fact is, a post-COVID scenario, there appears to be, there are whispers now of a pretty substantial infrastructure play around renewables, around energy efficiency, and the programs that would ultimately support that. We're hearing a number of sort of older programs that were mothballed and now being pulled off the shelves. So I think you're going to see at a federal level, there'll be certainly some tailwinds thrown behind we'll call the new energy sector. But that comes at a pretty big cost if you're sitting on a gas-fired power plant, if you're sitting on a coal-fired. I mean, who's still doing that? But, the fact is that when you look at those assets, you're going to have an infrastructure fund designed at its heart to remove the value of those assets, because it's going to drive, again, everything back to the grid edge. So it's going to be really interesting to see how that plays out. But the fact is, there's going to be a world of pain for a lot of businesses in the next sort of 5 to 10 years, because this is not something that's going to play out and sort of resolve itself in 2 to 3 years. I think the foundations are going to be set in the next 3 to 5 years. But we're talking a 10, 15, 20-year rollout of this technology, and at a global level. I'm not just sort of commenting here in Canada or the US, but this is a story that's playing out across the globe. Yeah, and the good thing is, if you're smart enough to look a little further afield than your backyard, you will see plenty of good examples of good policy that has been written to support the transition. Equally, I think you can sort of say that no one ever let a good decision get in the way of bad policy. We've seen that equally play out in many jurisdictions as well. But I think we could be well placed, but there's going to be some pain points coming down the pipe pretty soon.
So which sorry, Robert, you go.
Yeah, I was going to say. So obviously, there's going to be tension created between those countries that ultimately throw up their hands and say, "Okay, look at this. The end of this story is already written. Let's just jump into it and make this happen." And then there's going to be other countries that are going to be holdouts.
Yeah.
And so, where do those? What happens to those tensions? Like, what's the the domino effect of the tension that's created with those that adopt and those that don't?
I don't want to get into the sort of the provincial politics of this, but I'll be able to use this for one of the last times, given I've been in Canada for 4 years, right? But watching this play out as a spectator, the energy industry, and it's interesting because whenever I hear the energy industry now, I for some reason I exclude oil and gas. I don't know why, but I've already pivoted to this new energy reality. But it's really highlighting that we were addicted to big energy. Yeah, and we're going to go through some withdrawal symptoms that are not going to be pretty for economies. And you just have to look at where the oil prices went, at the back end of March. I mean, into negative territory. Yeah, that's a paradigm shift that you could never have predicted. But it drives now decision making, because I think it's really highlighted a lot of the fallibilities in the sector. Now, look, there's no way we're going to pivot to using electricity for all our cars in the next 12 months. That's just not going to happen. But we may actually see off the back of this that that big energy industry is supported somewhat by soft prices. The energy transition was banking on the fact that energy prices were going up. If you look at the business cases for EVs as an example, and I'll just go on a bit of a spin here, but when you look at the F-150 EV that was going to be launched next year, I say it's now being canned, but that was going to go out with a 180 kilowatt hour battery in it. It was going to go out with about 35 moving parts. That plays out if you're a fleet manager and you're looking at a business case between an ICE vehicle and that, you're looking now at the F-150 petrol version and going, 3,500 moving parts, guzzles gas. Yes, it is cheaper, but my OPEX costs are huge compared to an electric vehicle. The fact is that with cheaper gas prices, those business cases come back. They start to get a little closer because the capital cost of an EV is higher. Right now, I would even say though, with some of the new EVs that are coming out, it's a no-brainer for a fleet manager to go, look, 80% less OPEX, 2 to 3x on your rolling road life of that vehicle, and let's just say that I'm going to pay a 20% premium for that vehicle. It's still a no-brainer because the life of the asset is just the fundamentals are so much different. But if gas drops by 30, 40, 50%, it just gets them to hang on just that little bit longer. So we could see a small delay in some aspects of the energy transition off the back of what we've seen post-COVID. But again, I think the technology development curves of those technologies are, they're nowhere near complete. And so referencing that storage had dropped 80% in the last 5 years, it's forecast to drop another 40 to 60 in the next 3. Now that puts it, sorry.
Go ahead, Adam. You had a question.
I was just thinking that my brain was rattling around there. That's what that noise was in the background. But, everything you said, I can actually see starting to happen, but it's so deflationary, and also the impact on jobs. Just take the F-150 example, right? An order of magnitude reduction in maintenance and moving parts. How many jobs evaporate with that and servicing?
Oh yeah! Oh my gosh! I mean, we have even big guns.
Situation, right?
Wow, was that another one?
And Ben Affleck and Bruce Willis are not coming.
Look, it does. It's a really good line there, Adam, because the fact is that there's a whole socioeconomic spin to the energy transition. When you start looking at even the natural iteration of EVs is to autonomous vehicles, and you see that with all the latest EVs out there, they basically drive themselves anyway. But you move then into autonomous trucks. Now, truck drivers in the US, by percentage, are the largest group of professionals in the US. Yeah. If you turn all those long haul trucks into autonomous EVs, what do you do with 6-7 million truck drivers whose skill set's now just redundant? And that's just one piece of it. The other side of the coin is you're also building an industry. You're also building a whole new industry off the back of it. And there's some really interesting commentary around how even with that transition playing out, that we'll say the good, the bad, and the ugly, you've got even just the fundamentals of even my car. If I move to EV, my OPEX goes down. My rolling road life is longer. So the money that I was spending is now just only on wiper blades and tires. It's no longer the maintenance of the vehicle. So I've freed up a whole bunch of capital just in my budget because I'm not spending fixing, an antiquated technology. So you start to free up money in other areas. But it doesn't get us away from the fact that there are going to be some pretty significant losers in this scenario. It's just going to be interesting to see who the winners are going to be.
And how do we, I think about in terms of the conversion for the larger projects seem to be quite easy to get my head around. But when you're talking about, let's just talk about North America, we're talking hundreds of millions of residential properties that are running gas furnaces and gas boilers. Like this transition, we're not talking, this is going to be a lifetime of transition. This isn't going to happen. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it definitely is. But then you just got to look at some of those early markers, and I'll pick Generac out here. This is a company that was founded in residential generation technology powered by gas and fuel. They bought themselves an energy storage company. They bought themselves a residential energy storage company because they thought that's where this industry was moving. The fact is, and I'll come back to the energy transition now and the effects of the decarbonisation thing. I know I've dwelled on this a little bit, but it's going to become uncool to power your house with gas. And that's where the buying decisions are going to be impacted by not just the economics of how much is it going to cost me to get off gas. I don't want to be on gas because how my Instagram pics or my Facebook pics or whatever this shows me as someone who's not really living out that ethos of an eco warrior. You provide them with those tools, they'll pick them up, and they're not going to use those the classic sort of decision making. Oh, how much is it going to cost? It's going to last me 10 years. What am I going to buy next? It's just no. I want to look cool. So it's going to be an interesting. It's going to be an interesting environment, but it's not going to happen in 5 years. The technology will develop in 5 years. 5 to 10 max is when you're going to have that residential scale technology actually reach a point where you're not paying a premium over and above your existing connections. it's actually going to be the same thing as we're seeing now with both transmission connected plants in the US and certain jurisdictions. It makes no sense to continue to run a combined cycle gas generator that's transmission connected over a new build of solar for storage. You just wouldn't do it. The short run marginal cost just doesn't make any sense. We're just going to see that slowly work its way again to the grid edge, to the consumer, to the residential consumer. And when it gets there, when it actually makes business sense, commercial sense, on top of it being cool, that's when you start to see the hockey stick adoption.
Do you see, is there any play here for community-based combined heat and power systems? So there'll still be a gas demand, but the power generation is more local as opposed to at a plant.
Yeah, look, you're never going to get away from the fact that we're in the age of gas today. The age of gas will give way to the age of lithium or the age of storage or whatever it might be. But the fact is, you've got to look at, and this goes back to one of the my earlier days in the energy industry, where I think I saw a presentation put up on screen that said we waste 54% of all energy we produce. And first of all, I'm like, that's got to be a typo. That's stupid. Why would you do that? It turns out that that's on the low side. So the fact is, when you look at the upstream generators, the gas and the coals, the thermal generators, there's a huge amount of wasted energy at that level. Now, having had experience in the cogen space, when you look at a highly efficient combined heat and power unit, I mean, you're in the high 80s to early 90% efficiency. It just makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, I'm very familiar with the graph that you're talking about, and most countries produce them. They're a Sankey drawing. We say when the Sankey drawings are done poorly, we call them a skanky drawing. But 54% is lost energy, and one of those things that the graph doesn't describe is the quality of that energy we call exergy. And so we can say, like, even the energy that does get used, even if it's done at a high level of energy efficiency, maybe even, let's just take it at a small scale, numbers that people can typically understand, where you might be getting 94%, 95% out of say a furnace or a boiler. And that's at an energy efficiency level, but at an exergy efficiency level, we're only down around 17%, because the quality of the energy that gets converted, which is combustion, is incredibly high, 3,400 degrees Fahrenheit, 1,700 degrees C, right? So when we say 54% of that energy is lost, we're only talking about the energy use itself, but not the work that's also lost. And so that graph overstates the dire straits that we're actually in when we use combustion-based systems.
Agreed. And I think you touch on an interesting point there, because even your ability to generate energy, no matter how efficient it is, now you get into the efficiency of consumption, because they go hand in hand, right? And I think that really does underline a lot of my philosophy on where this transition is moving, and why at SensorSuite right now we're in the pursuit of building energy efficient grid resource buildings that are highly efficient in their day-to-day running, but also are connected to the system to provide support, to provide ancillary services. Because the hardest challenge, and this might be going back to one of the earlier questions around how utilities are going to navigate their way through this transition. The fact is that when a system operator has great visibility of upstream generation. Yeah. They know every plant that they've got, they know how it's running, they know where it's at, they know how much capacity they've got. But they're running pretty much blind on the demand side. And there's a natural equilibrium, natural equilibrium between the two, system inertia. There's a few other terms here, but the fact is that we need to open up the demand side, the visibility to the demand side, to improve the relationship between generation and consumption. And there's an old adage in the DER space: first you got to lose the weight before you buy the new suit. Right, and the fact that, so to your point, it doesn't matter how big the plant is. If your demand side is a fraction of that, you're just wasting not just the energy, but the resource itself. Yep,
absolutely.
That's
a story that story needs to get told, and it's not.
Yeah, and I'll geek out for just a second, because I know I mentioned the system inertia thing here, and there is a bit of a play for me in this, because I think as we do sort of embark on this pursuit of decarbonising our grids, the fact is we're deploying the single most disruptive generation technology into that 140-year-old system, and that's intermittent renewable generation. The fact is that when you don't have good visibility of the demand side, but you have really good visibility of the supply side, and all of a sudden, now the supply side is intermittent. How do you maintain system stability? How do you maintain that system resilience and reliability? And the fact is, it's very, very difficult. So we've got to be careful that as we pursue this transition, and as all the technology comes together, and that's why I look to SensorSuite as that conductor, right? You have to have a flexible and visible demand side to ensure that when you disrupt your supply side, you can still maintain that system inertia. And that's really where we talk the long game. For me, as a business like SensorSuite, is positioning ourselves to be that, not only the conductor, but the person who can sort of bring that all together. And that's going to be a bit of fun.
The Edifice Complex will continue in just a moment.
Robert, I have questions. Why aren't our buildings more like cars? Shouldn't our buildings warn us if something is wrong and could impact our health and safety? Why can't our buildings tell us how efficiently they're working? Why?
Well, they should, Adam, and they can. Our philosophy is designed for people, good buildings follow. This whole indoor environmental quality thing is becoming real important all around the world. Well, Tether have developed a mobile access property identity engine, and that enables landlords and property managers to monitor indoor environmental quality metrics plus energy consumption. It's all about making better decisions based on real-world information. Get smart, get tethered. For more information, go to tether.co.nz, and you can also hear from Tether CEO Brandon Van Blurk on our June 2020 episode of the Edifice Complex podcast.
And now, back to the show.
For someone who understands cooling systems, for me, it sounds like you need a big buffer vessel between your supply and demand side, right, to manage the swings in demand.
Absolutely, and the fact is, if you look at most of the large outages that we've seen over the course of the last 20 years, I mean, the 2003 outage up here, that was driven by a frequency event. It culminated in a cascade sort of blackout of a huge amount of system assets. But the fact is, it was frequency. That's what kicked it all off. That was with great visibility of the demand side, huge rotational sort of forces in those large generators. You need advanced power electronics to replicate that, and you need flexibility, and you don't get that in upstream generation. You get that in the demand side with all the new technology that's coming out now.
Yeah, interesting. I see, like, obviously there's a huge need for partnerships with companies like yourselves and current production providers, power production providers, but at the same token, they don't want to have partnerships with you. Do they get, because in many ways because it's, so how do you, as a business leader, how do you deal with that? Because it's like working with your enemy, and but at the same time, they're a source of your income. They're part of the future for you.
Yeah. And
then the other thing is that there's so many players around, there's obviously at some point there's going to be a merger of operations, companies coming together. So yeah, it's a two-part question. How do you deal with the enemy you're working with? And how do you deal with all the other small players that are also out there?
I kind of I go with the don't hate the player, just play the game better than everyone else, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
The fact, real world experience here, where I was speaking to an industry organization here in Ontario who just received a letter from a large upstream generator who shall remain nameless, which was asking them to support a paper they were going to present to the ISO that would basically position DERs in a negative light. And I sort of just, why do you think they'd want to do that, do you think? Oh, I don't know, maybe DERs are just bad, they're not good for the system. We're like, well, okay, maybe let me present an alternate sort of reality here, in that if you deploy 1 megawatts worth of generation at the grid edge, where do you think that 1 megawatt of value is removed from? And the light bulb just went, bing. It's like, yeah, that's exactly it. So it's just an extension of that obstructionist play. So a lot of these guys have pretty deep pockets. Now, I'm not saying that they're not looking at the new technology, but in the interim, they do not want to lose any of that value. right? So you just got to watch out for the snake in the grass, and sometimes you just might be paying that snake in the grass a weekly amount to keep your lights on. But to the point, going back to sort of my orchestra sort of analogy here, is the fact that there are a lot of soloists in the industry. We've got to come together to create that symphony, right?
Yeah.
So partnerships are fundamental to the transition, and in fact, I just on a phone call prior to this, to the show being recorded, where a gentleman was saying, "Look, I've got some IP. I've seen what you guys do. I think there's some crossover. There might be some competitive rub, but do you want to have a look at it?" Like, by all means. Yeah, I'm all for looking at something, a partnership where that crossover in IP raises value for both companies. You know, with that sort of philosophy in mind, then you really can't go too wrong. But yep, we'll always be to that point where we're all grown ups, and if we just find out we are direct competitors, well, hey, shake hands and say it was worth a try. But the fact is that there's going to be a lot of roll up. There's going to be a lot of acquisition in this space over the coming decade. You know, what this energy industry is going to look like at the end of the 2020s, no one will recognize it from today. But you will see some big companies rolling up. You've already got the likes of the Googles out there. You've got the likes of the Navigants, and a number of others who are already working on their vision of the smart city. And at its foundation is smart energy infrastructure. You know, so don't for a second think that, you know, if we look at potential exits of, you know, in this industry, I think there's going to be a lot of household names mopping those companies up over time.
Yeah, I mean, it takes a massive player who sort of operates at the scale of a nation state, like someone like Google, for example, is the best example probably. If they actually make a hard move into this space, it's a wrap, right? It's done.
Yeah.
And you look, they've already understand the consumer in the space.
Yeah.
In contrast to when you're in a monopoly in the utility game, look, you don't treat your customers as anything other than connections.
Yeah.
You're just that monthly clip the ticket and a bill. These consumer-based businesses have already got their head around the fact that the consumer will make buying decisions, and they understand the science behind those decisions.
Yeah.
So they're already positioning themselves to be that cool, energy partner, for lack of a better term, of choice. And when was the last time you looked at an energy utility and went, "Yeah, that's it. I want to work for those guys."
Call me Dougie.
Yeah. And case in point for myself, like I go back to my origin story when I started off at Genesis back in New Zealand. I got a Dear John letter after returning from a trip to Greece. It was "Hey, thanks for applying for a job. You haven't been successful." And I flicked an email back saying, "Oh, look, no worries. Any feedback would be great, but if anything else opens up." Within 4 minutes, I had an email back saying, "Hey, the person we picked didn't work out. Can you come in for an interview?" I'm like, even at that point, I was like, yeah, it just sounds so boring. I really don't know if I wanted, and I was this close to just going back and having a nap after traveling 37 hours to get back from Greece. But it's the best move I ever made. And as I say, wrapping it up, I'm lucky than good any day. We'll go with that. So
if we're talking energy, we got to have a very quick discussion about nuclear before we wrap up. Right? I'm a big fan of the French. Well, mostly they're women, but they have something like 70-75% of their electricity generation is nuclear. And those were decisions made a generation ago or two, right?
Yep.
But consequently, in this day and age, they are one of the lowest carbon economies in the world, right? So now the nuclear technology they're using is probably old. The nuclear technology that's around now, is it Therium? I can't remember the name of it, something with T. Anyway, so if we could just magically start from scratch here in Canada, would the optimum solution look like nuclear generation at scale, right? And then these super intelligent grids all interconnected. So you've got this constant AI interaction between supply and demand. So you've got green power generation, and then you're managing that generation based on feedback from local solar and PV generation, right? Would that be the optimum if you could wave your wand?
I say yes, because fundamentally nuclear generation is, it is one of, if not one of the cleanest, as you've mentioned, and I'd say one of the better generation technologies. The biggest issue with nuclear is, and I'll ask this question of both of you, do you want a nuclear generator in your backyard?
No, but you can put them in. I mean, if the transmission's there, where are nuclear plants now? Or where are big generation plants now, right? Why couldn't they be swapped out?
True. Because, well, it's not that they couldn't be swapped out. I think what you're seeing now is the new version of the technology and the small modular nukes that are now sort of coming to the fray.
And they're scalable, right? They can scale on demand, right? Yeah,
that's right. And the thing with that is, like I said, I want to split the technology from the image. The technology, factor, I think, I'm sold on the technology. Yeah, and if you could wave a wand and start with, everyone has a baseload generation fleet of nuclear, and then you round out your peaks with storage plus renewables, like nirvana. The fact is that most of the generation fleet is old, and we're going through some refurbishments now. But I seriously doubt whether we'll see any new nuclear plants, larger upstream ones, built again. Because the reputational state around nuclear is just so poor. The likes of even the shows like Chernobyl that have just come back. It just keeps
Chernobyl fueling. Is the most disturbing show I've seen in a long time.
Exactly. But the thing is, we have to understand, like for energy people who understand at its core how safe it is, how efficient it is, how fundamentally good it is.
It's a marketing problem, though, right? It's a PR problem.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, like at the end of the day, I might be the best dancer on the dance floor, but I got a face for radio, guys. Like it doesn't matter. My thing is, I'm not going to get picked up before the good-looking bloke next door. And the fact is that with the energy industry, we have to understand that most people are sort of oblivious to anything other than the bill.
Yeah.
And the sound bites and the news bites that they see on the news. And, look, you just got to look back a couple of weeks where everyone woke up on a Sunday morning to an alert that there was an accident at a power station, in a nuclear power station. Now, the reputation image, off the back of that, that's the sort of thing I just don't know if nukes can jump that shark. I just don't know if they can.
I don't know. So who in the world is doing well at this sort of future you're developing and describing?
There's a lot of people who have had the concept for some time. And look, I'll go back to a video that I saw that came out when I first started in this game from British Gas. And it was their vision of the energy future. And it really was just an interconnected home. It had every element of that home that consumed energy was interconnected, and it just ran in the background. Yeah. Right. So I think there's a lot of companies out there with a great vision, but the issue is, again, I go back to the soloist. There's a lot of specialists in the space, and we've yet to see the true value of a lot of these assets through aggregation. And that's where, I can point to the likes of E.ON out of Europe. I can point to British Gas, Centrica, Direct Energy's business, their solutions division do a lot of this good stuff. But it is predominantly at a commercial industrial scale, because that's where it made the most economic sense. What we're seeing now is a transition to that next step down in the system, to the grid edge, and it will be to the smaller, the smaller business, the small to medium business area will adopt it next, and then ultimately when it hits the residential environment is when you start to see businesses that you wouldn't have thought of, today really come to the fray. But I think there are a lot of good examples around the world, but I don't know if I can point to anyone other than. Look, I would probably point out Sunrun in the US, who've done a great job at turning a solar-based rooftop solar business now into a company that is aggregating load on the demand side to provide ancillary market services. I think they won an ancillary, an auction in New England recently. Now it's just that's great to see, because now you're actually developing the technology to really bring that full demand side together to provide system services. But there aren't many, and in fact, when I look at, when we go through, so our process, we're raising funds and speaking to investors, they're all after that. Who's your direct competitor? Who do you compete with? And like, well, if we talk about thermostats, yeah, I compete with a few people directly on thermostats. So thermostat 1, thermostat 2. The fact is I'm building a platform. So I can't sort of say like if I'm selling cars, you've picked out the tires. Okay, well, who are you competing with in tires when I make cars? It's not a fair sort of comparison. But they struggle because there are no comparable companies out there. Yeah, and and if they are, they're really, really hard to find. So there are not too many of us who are at this level. I mean, I can speak to a couple that I came up and who I was looking at from New Zealand, Josh Wong at Opus One. You know, those companies like that who are really ploughing through into the smart grid sort of space. Those are the ones that really drew my attention. And there are a number of those out there, but again, at scale, it's hard to point to a big name.
That's interesting. I mean, Australia as a country are probably quite advanced in what they're doing.
Yes, in the specific areas, because again, when you start looking at the transition they've gone through, and I'll pick here specifically on that rooftop solar deployment. Yeah. So some fun facts: the first million homes that were deployed, I think, for rooftop solar had a combined capacity of about 2.9 gigawatts of combined capacity. The second million was 5.9 gig of combined capacity. So the same amount of homes, but now you've in excess of doubled that capacity, and they're all being paired with storage. So you've got some really good IP out of there of how to build the systems, how to integrate those systems into an energy market or into an energy grid. So there's a lot of really cool stuff. And then they sort of going down the path of when you have all this stored energy and you start looking at the Uber of energy or whatever term you want to use. And there's some really neat businesses looking at how do they aggregate that stored value coming out of Australia as well. And you're looking at the sort of distributed ledger and billing structures. So there's a lot of that sort of stuff, but sort of at an infrastructure level, I would probably say no, there's not a lot of neat stuff going on. Tesla's big battery in South Australia would be a notable exception. But I think a lot of the cool stuff that's coming out of there is how to really extract more value out of what is effectively dormant energy. It's stored, waiting there to be used, and you're seeing some really cool business models coming out looking at ways to aggregate that and monetize it.
It's interesting.
Yeah. Interesting. You know, Glenn, I have a couple of questions for you. One for sure, and that is, and Adam and I, of course, since we started the podcast, have been trying to, bring the other strong voices from out in the wilderness and into the discussion. And one of those voices, of course, is the female voice. And we've had some great women on our podcasts who've had great advice over the years, over the our interviews for women coming into the industry. Adam made reference to some French women, Joan of Arc, Maria Curie, two well-known French women that changed the way we look at things. Are there any women in this sector that are coming up that have a voice that can play a way to influence what you're doing?
Yeah, I think there's quite a few here, and I think this is one of the luxuries of working in a place like Canada, right? I mean, this is a global melting pot, not just for races and cultures, but in between the sexes as well. So I think the energy industry is. I'm not going to say spoiled for choice because you can never be too spoiled when you've got talent rolling around. But there are a number, I think, of there are a number of people out there with high quality talent, regardless of sex. I think Canada is lucky enough to have a lot of really, really talented women in the space.
The Edifice Complex will continue in just a moment.
Adam, it's time to thank some people who are on our side. Blue Rhythm Commissioning Software.
Blue Rhythm is the commissioning software I've been looking for. Most projects I consult on suffer from poor information and document management. Frankly, it's just chaos out there. Blue Rhythm removes this chaos. It is a secure, always available cloud solution designed to work on any computer, tablet, or smartphone. Their Android and iOS apps allow seamless transition between online and offline work. But what I like most about Blue Rhythm is their painless and fast onboarding process. Our team will bring all your existing forms and checklists into Blue Rhythm for you, or you can use or adapt their pre-built, pre-functional and functional performance test sheet templates. But it's more than that. It enables collaboration, automation, and easy planning and project management for all your projects. Blue Rhythm provides amazing support from a team that really understands your industry. To find out more, go to bluerhythm.com or call country code +1 612 460 8305. Also, you can hear from Blue Rhythm President Andy Martin on episode 26 of the Edifice Complex podcast.
And now, back to the show.
Inbuilt ability to work. I think Adam and I have had these discussions before. Work better in teams and sort of breaking down barriers that exist sometimes because of men and just our own characteristics. And I just see that there's a lot of well, there just seems like there's a lot of barriers in this marketplace that need to be broken down. And I just see that having women who have that ability to break those barriers down would just serve mankind, and a bad choice of words, people kind, in a better way than what we do,
Yeah, look, I'm going to sort of run with this as a sort of some commentary around that. So I've pulled together a list of people that I consider to be incredibly sophisticated when it comes to sort of market fundamentals, market structures, and whether that be from how upstream generation attaches to transmission grids, whether it be battery storage and how that sort of supports different things. But the fact is, I brought now 12 people together in a personal sort of mentor group, and of that, 8 of those people are women.
Fantastic.
Nice.
In that, there when I look at it, and it's not because I went out saying I need to get a women's perspective on it. It's because I went out looking for the best people. Yeah, and as I say, it's just spoiled for choice. And it's not just based in Canada. I've looked at my connections around the world, and it just so it happens that I think the women that I'm talking specifically really have they're looking for what's next. They've got a vision that, I wouldn't say not aligns with mine, but, we come from similar stock, we'll say it that way, but we're all focused on one thing. And that is, leaving this planet in a better place than we found it, just doing a bit to move that needle back one notch. Yeah. And if, maybe there might be something in there that's sort of skewed slightly one way than the other with our women friends. But the fact is that, so for me, I love the conversation. I'm probably unique in the fact that I've got 26 female cousins and 3 male cousins, 2 daughters. Mother Nature was designed me to be a girl dad. So
there's an imbalance there. I love the fact that you said that you were looking for the best people, and what percolated up was what percolated up, right? Which was absolutely. That's fantastic, because I really believe in true equality, not selective equality when it suits you, right? So you should always look for the best person. Hopefully that's someone you want to work with, right? The fact that we're now in an age where men and women both percolate up in them lists, that is real progress, in my opinion.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, I look back at my career and look, I've had the luxury to work with some incredibly talented people, and the learning experiences I've gained from some of the less talented people. But I just like to say, I'm a lifelong learner, and I don't care if you wear a skirt or a pair of pants. It doesn't really matter. If I can learn something from you, you're a friend of mine.
That's the old Steve Jobs thing, right? You're either a 0 or 1. You're either good for me or you're not. I don't care anything else, right?
You got it.
And there's a purity to that and a simplicity to that absolutely works, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I couldn't agree more. So look, I want to be respectful of your time, actually. We're coming up to the end. You got one more question, Robert?
Well, it was going to be one of the, end questions for we ask for all of our guests. And again, it goes back to my question with women in the industry. If you had to give a graduating lecture, they're at the podium and you're talking to the women in the industry, graduating from universities and colleges around the world, what would your advice be to these people as it relates to your market segment?
Well, I'm going to run with, I'm assuming that I'll be giving a presentation to people and women who would be looking at the energy sector as an industry to get into. And I would stand up and applaud them for just making the right decision. The fact is that they've jumped on board this ship at the outset of this transition. There's a reason they're calling it the fourth industrial revolution. I don't think we'll see this again in our lifetimes or in the next one, perhaps. But the fact is well done. Buckle up. This is going to be a fun ride, and you've got a wealth of opportunity ahead of you. There are no dumb ideas. You come together with that and some of the technology, and I say you're going to have a lot of fun.
I love that answer. Thank you for that. Yeah.
Okay, so I've got one rapid fire question for you. What would you say to a D.O.U.G who was like pushing back on you?
Yeah.
So just for our listeners, remember that's a dumb old utility guy.
Get out of the
way. Do you have an option to take early retirement?
Yes, that is absolutely right. Because that's actually a win-win, right?
Yeah.
That person goes off into the sunset on their defined benefit pension, and it makes a space for something new to come along, right?
That's it, mate. Yeah. That's exactly.
I love it.
Win-win. That's awesome.
Changing of the guard.
Great point to end on. So, Glen, thank you very much for coming on. That was fascinating. I always think it's hard to make energy an interesting conversation, but it so is, right? Because you talk about people, nuclear technologies, new technologies, the Internet of Things. There's so much going on.
Well, yeah, but I don't want to drink too much of my own Kool-Aid there, Adam, because the fact is that between us, it is cool. If I go with how many barbecue conversations I killed last year when asked the question, what do you do for a job? I think it's cool. And, I tell you what, the people I mix with right now certainly do think as well. And I think we just get the chance to introduce a lot more people to its coolness over the coming years.
Yeah. Yeah, you need a Don Draper on staff. You need a marketing man.
You got it.
Okay, man. Well, listen, thank you very much for coming on. I really enjoyed it. And we'll keep in touch. And best of luck with SensorSuite and everything you're doing.
Thanks, gents. Thanks for the opportunity. Have a great day. Take care.
All right,
take care. I do sign everything off now with wash your hands, don't touch your face, and stay safe.
Too late for me.
Good advice.
Right. So listen, that's the end. Don't log off yet.
Yeah,
I'll just make a note. So that was good. I'm rather than stop starting the recording, I'm just going to record everything. Timestamp notes for our audio and video.
Sure.
So that was awesome, mate. That was great. Thanks very much for that.
Cool. There's some content in there to use. I think you'll cut that down to what, 45 or so?
That get cut down to about 45, 50 minutes.
Okay.
I mean, he goes through, cuts all the ums and ahs out and all the sort of interruptions and generally makes us look a lot better than we are, which is what we pay him for.
Exactly.
Yeah. And if I cast my camera around, you'll see that I position myself nicely against my bedroom wall.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of going, my 2-year-old went down for her nap at 1. She usually goes 2 hours, 2.5. She's open any minute. She's 2 doors down. I'm like,
come on. Kick the door in a minute. That's right, mate. So we'll let you go. I'll have a separate call you next week about getting the sponsorship stuff sorted.
Yep.
You got all your financing done? You got your raise?
Yeah, mate, we're so close. I think we're going to find out in the next week or so where we're at. I think we've got through the hump. So we're lucky enough now to have BDC. A new fund that's stepped up there, which I think we're taking.
Yeah.
Well, they've set up a matching fund now to support businesses through COVID. My CFO is just a legend. We were actually the first company in Canada to apply for it.
Wow.
So now our VC is going through due diligence with BDC to make sure that they're a bona fide VC. But assuming that goes through, we should be able to wrap up this round quite comfortably. So
nice. Well done.
Cautiously optimistic, always knocking on wood because it ain't a deal till the money is in the bank. But we just got too much opportunity in front of us for this to go any other way than get some good capital coming in. So
all right, mate. Well, we'll let you go now.
Good luck with that. Yeah.
I'll check in with you next week and speak soon.
Yeah, I'm just going to ask Robert, where are you based?
Calgary.
Calgary. Mate, you're just spookily familiar. So I don't know where.
It's because he's plastered all over the internet. That's why.
No, I'm talking more a case of I think we might have had a beer at some stage.
Well, you know what, it could be, and because I used to be quite involved with the district energy industry, and we sold our company to Danfoss, which was we were making substations for, and we worked with companies like Katner FE, I don't know that name spelled all to you all, but we were at a few conferences, where you get the general municipalities are there. And maybe that's where we ran into each other.
Yeah, just
anyway.
Either that or just some other good-looking bloke, eh?
Well, there's three of us here, so this,
Yeah, that's the pull.
Adam, that was another interesting conversation, and what I liked about Glen is obviously he's sat back and looked at the energy industry, and particularly power production, power grids, demand side, production side. He's made some really great comments, in terms of the age of the grid and who's managing that old system. And I think one of the acronyms he had was D.O.U.G, which was dumb old utility guys. And they're out there, but they're out there in lots of different industries. But when we talk about power production and energy, obviously there's a change happening, and he's observing it, and he's trying to find, on behalf of his company and his shareholders, a way to navigate this.
Yeah, I mean, what he's trying to do is difficult, right? And there has to be someone to take on difficult things, right? That's how we got to the moon. That's how things are developed. But it's a tough job. But I loved his observation about protect and obstruct. You could apply that at so many levels in the property business, right? Because the D.O.U.Gs are the utility version of, for instance, trades that don't want to change, right? The movement to modular and off-site construction is a struggle. Why is that? Because there's a protect and obstruct culture that says, I've always driven down the highway to my projects and I work all day on site and I go home, right? Why would I want to change that? And I get that. If I've been doing that for 30 years, I don't want to change that. But at some point, the property industry has to evolve, right? The forces of change around it are building so high.
Yeah. And it's interesting too, because I get to work with, some utility guys that I wouldn't call D.O.U.Gs. Many of them understand the circumstances that we're in as a society, and we know that there's obviously a demand for energy, and they're trying to find a way on behalf of their organizations to again navigate through these changes. And part of it is working with developers, industry associations, trying to reduce demand on systems, and at the same time optimize whatever energy gets converted to optimize that use. So there are individuals within, old guys that actually, that have been around that understand their role and are trying to, do best by society. On the other hand, there's a lot of people at leadership levels that fall under that acronym of D.O.U.G. There's no doubt about it, right?
God, yeah. I mean,
so we can't characterize everybody within the utility.
No. To take the flip side of a D.O.U.G, right? So they're derided as D.O.U.Gs because there's a little bit of jealousy there, right? They're in a job where they work regular hours, they get a great defined benefit pension, and if people understand money, that is the freaking gold standard, right? An inflation-protected guaranteed pension when you're old. I mean, them things are not going to be available to our children, right? Nope. So there's a bit of jealousy there. But also there's a larger knowledge as well, right? The challenge is, how do you separate the good from the bad, and then from the good, get that knowledge and somehow bank it and make it useful, right? That's the challenge, because with 30 years experience comes such a lot of ingrained knowledge and expertise. Somehow you got to codify that and pass that on, right?
Yeah. I've had the chance to work with some people from Direct Energy and also BC Hydro. And And both of those organizations have people within their ranks that are exactly who you're talking about. You know, they've got some really great experience and good ideas, and there will always be a place for them, you know, at the table, because they have this ability. So yeah, it's an interesting place. He made some other comments, which we've talked about before, and actually you brought it up many times, the idea about stranded assets.
Yeah, that is a big thing.
Yeah, every time I hear that word, I get worried.
Well, do you know what that might look like 50 years from now? Is everyone's driving along going, oh, look, there's electrical pylons. That used to be a thing.
Right.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, with efficiency in power transmission and changes in grid structure, could a pylon, you know, the same way when I grew up in the UK, in certain parts of London, there used to be what are called gas monitors, these massive gas storage, circular gas storage tanks, and they went up and down as the gas was in them, and they were just there, and they were a feature. They're probably dangerous as hell, right? If one of them blew up, that'd take out a whole block, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And then in the 80s and 90s, with the move to natural gas, they went away, and they just slowly went away. They were a curiosity, and then they went derelict, and then they just slowly got redeveloped, and they were gone, right? Is that the future for electrical pylons and cables all over the land? Maybe.
You know, it's funny because I was watching a site on drones, and drones were used to do aerial photography of stranded ships, you know, ships that had crashed onto shore, you know, and they're just rotting away, you know, Mother Nature is taking over. And someday there'll be a video online about drones doing aerial shots of these power plants that are archaic and old and have served their purpose.
It's a big problem, and I always am encouraged and feel good there's people like Glen who are willing to take that problem on, because quite frankly, I've not got the energy or the expertise to do anything like that at my age, right? You know?
Yeah.
So, you know, change is a young man's game sometimes, in fact, all the time, I'd say, you know, and I'm really glad people are there to do that. It makes me feel good, you know what I mean?
Well, retirement comes nicely when you've spent your whole life falling on a sword.
Yeah. I'm exhausted, you know.
I am too, but I'm also encouraged by the energy that's there, and no pun intended, you know, that young people bring, and then also the women are bringing to the industry. Like I get pumped up to see that kind of stuff, because we fought for it for so long, you know, and you know we saw some wins in our careers, but I think we're starting to see more and more, which I'm really happy about. And I was incredibly happy to hear him talk about, you know, his circle of people that he gets to work with, and to have such a large number of women influencing the decisions. I love that. I was really, really excited to hear all of that happen. He made some statements that are also, which were very interesting. Uncool to use gas. I thought that was good. Uncool to use gas.
So what he was basically saying was, at the moment, it's an upper middle class thing. It's a status symbol, right?
Yeah,
like,
right.
You know, but you know, as that percolates down, it will become uncool, right, to use gas, and uncool to do certain things. I was talking to my daughter about this the other day. She's developing a Porsche obsession like her dad. I said, you do realize one day an old dude like me driving a petrol driven car will be like the equivalent of an old guy who won't walk around without a gun strapped to his side. Right? You'll become a social pariah.
Exactly. Yeah.
You'll be that crazy old guy. Why can't he get an electric car like everyone else? He's stinking the place out with that petrol car.
Yeah. He said another thing which I thought was really good, and we asked him about competitors. You know, don't hate the players, just become a better player. Yeah. And you know that has so many applications in life and business, and you know, and we do see a lot of organizations that have hate and resentment, and well, again, you know, it's the protect and obstruct type. But the reality is that when you get people who are good at the game, they make change, you know, and they tend to be people that sit outside the status quo. We've talked before how, you know, what happens when industries get started, that members come together, they create rules, the new people come in, they got to play by the rules, and eventually, you know, 100 years later, you've got this entire industry that's built upon rules by the status quo.
Yeah.
And so change doesn't happen, because if you want to play that game, you got to play by those rules. But it's the people that come outside of the status quo that are better at the game that make the changes.
Yeah, damn right.
And so I love that statement, don't hate the players or don't hate the status quo. Just get better at what the status quo does and get everybody else to play by the new rules that you're creating, right? That's a great strategy, and I wish them all, anybody that plays by that strategy, I love that.
Should win, yeah. I like the macro. The age of gas will give way to the age of lithium storage.
Yeah.
It's quite,
right?
Yeah. He is Don Draper. We don't know.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And then his comment about the fourth revolution, and I thought that was really good, because that we'll see continue on in our lifetime, and we'll be long gone before something else comes along. But I think he's absolutely right.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that was good. I've come out of that discussion feeling encouraged by the future. I'm normally positive about the future, just for the fact that my kids are a lot nicer than me and my generation. So, but you see things like this and you see the change. It always gives me hope for the future, because good things are happening. Even if you don't see them, there's good things going on, and they're working away, and it's good, man. I'm really positive about the future, despite everything that's going on. I'm actually very upbeat about what's coming down the pipe. It'll be a struggle, but things will get better, I think, and things will develop for the better. I'm convinced of that.
Well, when we were young men and we were doing our thing, and we were very much change agents, and we got excited about the things that we were able to accomplish. And now we're able to sit back and we're able to watch young people do the same thing. And we are seeing young people, young minds, young energy, making the necessary changes for the future and for the better, right? And hopefully that filters into the political system. It certainly is in the science world. We see it. Like when I think, we get onto the social media and you look at the research work that's been coming out of COVID, these are like 25-year-olds and 35-year-olds doing this research work. These aren't like 80-year-olds or 70-years or 60-year-olds. I mean, there are some guys that are out there and girls that are doing it, but these are young minds trying to solve a problem today that's a global problem. And they're loving it, the stuff that they're learning. I'm so excited for them,
That is the big benefit that's never spoken about the internet, is the way it gives people the ability to sidestep the gatekeepers. You got a great idea, put it up there, right? There's no reason. So there's none of this excuse, I couldn't get a meeting with Fred, or I couldn't do this, right? You got a great idea, put it out there. Let's have a look at it, right?
I love that. The internet allows you to what did you say? The internet allows you to sidestep.
The internet allows you to sidestep gatekeepers, which is why CNN and Fox News and late night talk shows are all in decline, because before you had to kiss their feet to get on there, right? Now, Joe Rogan is the new Johnny Carson, right? And he answers to no one except Joe Rogan. Yeah. There was an episode of Joe Rogan recently where Bill Maher went on there and begged Joe Rogan to go on his show. That was, for me, the moment where Joe Rogan's is more of a show, like YouTube shows, eclipsed mainstream TV.
Yeah. Well,
Joe Rogan's show gets 10 million downloads a show or something.
Is it really?
Yeah. Bill Maher's show, and I like Bill Maher's show. I watch it because you get lots of crazy people on it. And he doesn't even get 1 million viewers.
Yeah.
Right? And he knows if Joe Rogan goes on that show, his numbers go up, right?
Yeah. I remember when Howard Stern, took a big hit, and then just basically thumbed his nose at the status quo of broadcasting and said, fine, I'll create my own show. Shock, jock, right? Yeah. And today, he was one of the early guys to basically put his thumb up and said, screw you guys, right?
Yeah, he went around the gatekeeper, right? The gatekeeper said, shut that gate, I'm out.
Yeah, totally, right? And you're absolutely right. The internet allows people to sidestep the gatekeepers. They just gotta frustrate the hell out of the gatekeepers, right?
Oh yeah. There's a lot of middle managers and executives in TV stations who are really no longer necessary, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway,
so it's
on
good
that,
to see. Yeah.
so
Yeah. I mean, it's great to see, and it's great to see. As I said, we're seeing the research come out. The changes come out, the youth and the energy, and so how can we? It's a sucky time to be around because of what's happening globally with the virus, but at the same time, we're starting to see out of that change agents, and so a really cool time to be an observer. Right?
Yeah, it is really. I am so positive about the future. I really am.
Yep.
Okay, man. So on that happy note, I shall see you on the next one.
All right, Adam.
See you later. Cheers. Bye.
You've been listening to the Edifice Complex podcast with Adam Muggleton and Robert Bean. To access show notes for this episode, visit edificecomplexpodcast.com. If you have enjoyed this podcast, please leave us a review on iTunes. See you next time.